I have been a judge for over 40 years. I have seen things in this courtroom that would break most people, but I never expected one Tuesday morning to bring a case that would bring me, the judge, to my knees. In 38 years on this bench, only one case made me walk out of the courtroom and sit in my car for 20 minutes just to collect myself. This is that case, and you deserve to hear every single word of it. If you believe that the universe has a way of settling its debts, that justice has a timing that no man can rush or delay, then you need to watch this all the way to the end. Do you believe in that kind of justice? Hit that subscribe button right now, because I promise you, by the time we get to the last minute of this story, you will feel it in your chest in a way that no courtroom drama has ever made you feel before. We are just getting started. Let's go. It was a Tuesday, October 14th. The sky over Providence was that flat gray color it gets in the fall, like the whole city is holding its breath. I had been on the bench since 8:30 that morning. Case number CV 2024-8847 was called at 10:47 a.m. I remember the time exactly because I had just glanced at the clock and thought to myself, 12 more cases before lunch. I had no idea that this one would undo everything I thought I knew about the people who walked through my courtroom doors. The officer who filed the report was Sergeant Daniel Reyes, badge number 4471 out of the Providence Police Department's 3rd District. He was a good officer, experienced. The kind of man who writes a ticket without judgment and lets the court do its job. In his report, filed at 8:52 a.m. on October 14th, he described what happened on the corner of Broad Street and Elmwood Avenue at 8:19 that morning. A vehicle, a 2024 Lamborghini Huracan EVO in pearl white, Rhode Island plate Ashworth, was clocked by traffic camera doing 67 miles per hour in a posted 25-mile-per-hour school zone. 67 in a school zone on a Tuesday morning when children were still walking to class. But that was not even the worst part of Sergeant Reyes's report. The worst part was that at 8:19:43 a.m., that Lamborghini ran a solid red light at the intersection and came within 4 feet of striking a pedestrian who was legally crossing the street. The pedestrian was an 84-year-old man. He was carrying a small paper bag from the CVS pharmacy 6 blocks from his apartment. Inside that bag was a bottle of generic blood pressure medication. He bought the generic because it was $11 cheaper than the name brand. He could not afford the bus fare that morning, so he had walked those 6 blocks in the October cold. His name was Walter Kowalski. I want you to understand who Walter Kowalski was before I tell you who Tyler Ashworth was. Because this story only means something if you understand the full weight of what was almost taken from this world on that street corner. Walter enlisted in the United States Army on March 3, 1967. He was 19 years old. He served 2 full tours in Vietnam. He was awarded the Purple Heart on December 9, 1968, for wounds received during a firefight in Quang Tri Province. He came home in the spring of 1969 with a slight limp in his left leg that he carried for the rest of his life and never once complained about. He worked for 31 years at the Providence Water Supply Board as a maintenance technician. He married his wife Eleanor in 1971. They had 1 daughter, Carol, who now works 2 jobs, days at a hospital laundry facility, evenings at a pharmacy counter, to pay rent on her apartment. Eleanor passed 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Walter still slept on his side of the bed. Walter came to my courtroom that morning as a witness. He did not need to come. There was no legal requirement, but when Sergeant Reyes asked him if he would be willing to appear, Walter Kowalski said, and the sergeant wrote this down in his notes, "Son, I've been showing up when it mattered my whole life. I'm not going to stop now." He rode the bus to the courthouse. He wore his veteran's cap, the one with the pins on it. He sat in the front row, and he folded his hands in his lap, and he waited. Now let me tell you about Tyler Ashworth. Tyler James Ashworth III was 24 years old. He was the only son of Senator Richard Ashworth III, one of the most powerful political figures in the state of Rhode Island. Tyler had 341,000 Instagram followers. His profile picture was him leaning against that same pearl white Lamborghini with a bottle of Dom Perignon in his hand. He He was wearing a Hermes H-buckle belt that retails for $8.95, Gucci loafers, a Rolex Daytona in rose gold that his father reportedly gave him for his 21st birthday. Retail price $34,000. Tyler Ashworth had never held a job. He managed a lifestyle brand on social media, posting luxury travel content from places like the Maldives and Monaco. He had received 4 traffic violations in the previous 2 years. All 4 had been reduced or dismissed. His family had a very well-known attorney in this city whose name I will not say in this courtroom. Tyler walked into my courtroom at 10:47 a.m. wearing a navy Tom Ford blazer and no tie. His hair was perfectly styled. He had earbuds in until his attorney nudged him to remove them. He looked around my courtroom like a man who had walked into the wrong restaurant, inconvenienced and vaguely insulted at the same time. He saw Walter Kowalski sitting in the front row, this small, thin, 84-year-old man in his veteran's cap, and Tyler Ashworth smirked, not a small smirk, a full, deliberate smirk that said very clearly, "I am not afraid of this place, and I am certainly not afraid of him." His attorney was Marcus Webb, Esquire, very expensive suit, monogrammed cufflinks. He stepped to the podium, and before I had even formally opened the case, he said, "Your Honor, my client would like to resolve this matter as quickly as possible. We're prepared to pay any associated fines today." Like they were settling a parking ticket, like this was nothing. I looked at Marcus Webb for a long moment. Then I looked at Tyler Ashworth. Then I looked at Walter Kowalski. I said, "Mr. Webb, we will proceed on my schedule, not your client's." Tyler Ashworth exhaled through his nose. He actually rolled his eyes. In my courtroom, I have seen arrogance before, I have seen entitlement before, but something about the way this young man carried himself, like the rules that governed every other human life simply did not apply to him, made my jaw tighten in a way it rarely does. I read the violation aloud. Speeding, 67 and a 25, running a red light, reckless operation, near miss of a pedestrian. I asked Tyler Ashworth to explain himself. He leaned into the microphone and said, "Judge, I was late to a meeting. I didn't see the man in the crosswalk. The camera system in this city is notoriously inaccurate, and I believe—" I stopped him. "Mr. Ashworth, the camera recorded you at 67 miles per hour, the speed of a vehicle on a highway, on a street where 7-year-olds cross to get to school. You were late to a meeting." I let those words sit in the air. "Is that your full explanation?" He looked at his attorney. His attorney gave a tiny nod. Tyler looked back at me. "Yes, Your Honor, that's essentially it." The courtroom was very quiet. I asked Sergeant Reyes to describe what he saw at the scene that morning. The sergeant stood, and in a clear voice he said, "Your Honor, I arrived at the intersection at approximately 8:22 a.m. Mr. Kowalski was seated on the curb. He had dropped his bag. His hands were shaking. A bystander was with him. The vehicle did not stop." He paused. "The vehicle did not stop, Your Honor." I looked at Tyler Ashworth when the sergeant said that. The vehicle did not stop. Tyler was looking at his phone under the table. I said his name, loudly. He looked up. I said, "Did you stop your vehicle after nearly striking this man?" Tyler said, "I didn't think I had actually made contact, so—" I said, "So you left?" He said, "I had a meeting." The woman in the second row, a school teacher named Mrs. Patricia Monroe, who had been in my courtroom for a separate matter, made a sound. It was a soft sound, like a quiet gasp of pure disbelief. I heard it. Everyone heard it. Now I need you to understand something before we go any further. Because what I am about to tell you happened next in that courtroom is something I have never shared publicly until right now. And if you have ever doubted whether the universe keeps a ledger, whether the things we do and the things we fail to do eventually come back around, what happens in the next part of this story is going to shake you. If you made it this far, let me ask you something. I dare you to stop watching right now. I dare you to click away, because I promise you, the next part of this story is the reason this case went viral in 48 states. Can you do it? Can you stop watching? I didn't think so. Keep going with me. I called Walter Kowalski to the podium. He rose from the front row slowly, the way older men rise. carefully, deliberately, with the quiet dignity of someone who has learned that the body asks for respect it once did not need. He walked to the podium. He adjusted the microphone down because it was set for a taller person. He looked at me. His eyes were blue and steady. I said, "Mr. Kowalski, would you like to tell me what happened that morning?" He said, "Yes, Your Honor, I would." He described it simply. No drama, no performance. He said he had walked to the pharmacy like he did every Tuesday because Tuesday was the day his prescription renewed. He said he checked for the light before he crossed. He always checked twice because his hearing was not what it used to be. The light turned green. He stepped into the crosswalk. He heard an engine. He said it sounded like a scream. And then there was a blur of white and a rush of air, and the side mirror of the car clipped his paper bag and sent it skidding across the street, and he sat down on the curb because his legs gave out, not from being hurt, from the shock of being alive when he nearly wasn't. The room was completely still. Then Tyler Ashworth's attorney said, "Your Honor, there is no evidence of actual physical contact between the vehicle and the pedestrian. My client's record, while imperfect, does not warrant." Walter Kowalski turned and looked at Tyler Ashworth. Just looked at him, and Tyler Ashworth, for the first time since he had entered my courtroom, looked away. He actually looked at the floor. Something in the old man's gaze did what my words, the sergeant's testimony, and the sound of that teacher's disbelief had not quite managed to do. It made Tyler Ashworth small, but we were not even close to the end of this story. Not even close. At 11:14 a.m., my clerk handed me a folded note. She had a look on her face I had not seen before. She whispered, "Your Honor, there is someone in the hall from the federal building. He says it is urgent and it involves the Ashworth case." I looked at the note. It had 3 initials on it that stopped my breathing for a half second. FBI. I called a brief recess. Here's the part that nobody outside of that courtroom has heard. Here is the reason this case is different from every other case in my career. Now, I know you're at the edge of your seat right now, and I want you to stay right there because what just arrived through that door is the piece of this puzzle you have been missing. Drop a comment right now and tell me, did you see this coming? Because nobody in that courtroom did. Nobody. The man who walked in during recess was Special Agent Thomas Greer, badge number 7230304, from the Providence Field Office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He was not there about a speeding ticket. Agent Greer informed me, the prosecutor, and Marcus Webb in the hallway that Tyler Ashworth had been under federal investigation for the previous 6 months as part of a coordinated street racing network operating across 3 states, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. The network was called, and I am not making this up, the name they used was Phantom Circuit. They had organized 16 illegal street races in urban areas over 11 months. 3 of those races had resulted in property damage. 1 had resulted in a minor being struck and injured on Reservoir Avenue in November of 2023. A 13-year-old boy named Marcus Webb, no relation to the attorney, who had been walking home from football practice and spent 4 days in Hasbro Children's Hospital with a fractured femur. The boy's mother, a single parent named Delia Webb, had never been able to identify the car, until now, because the same traffic camera network that caught Tyler Ashworth on October 14th had, when cross-referenced by Agent Greer's team, matched his Lamborghini's license plate to a partial image captured on Reservoir Avenue on November 7, 2023 at 11:23 p.m. Marcus Webb, the attorney, went pale. Tyler Ashworth, who had rejoined us in the hallway at my instruction, went very still. The arrogance, the blazer, the smirk, the phone under the table, all of it just drained out of him like water from a broken glass. He looked at his attorney and said quietly, "I need my father." It was the most human thing he had said all morning. And then Tyler Ashworth made his second catastrophic mistake of the day, because at some point during the recess, before Agent Greer arrived, Tyler had taken out his phone, and he had opened Instagram, and he had posted a story. It was a selfie taken inside my courthouse in the hallway with the caption, and I was shown this by Agent Greer, who had screenshot it at 11:09 a.m. before it was deleted. The caption read, "Traffic court LOL, this is what poor people do for fun," back by lunch. 340,000 followers saw it before it came down. 17 of them had already screenshotted it and reposted it. One of those reposts had been shared by a local news account with 280,000 followers. By the time I walked back into my courtroom at 11:31 a.m., that screenshot was trending in Providence. I showed it to nobody in the courtroom. I did not need to. I already knew what I was going to do. But then Tyler Ashworth did something that sealed his fate in a way that even I could not have predicted. When I resumed the proceedings and informed him that federal authorities had presented evidence connecting him to a broader criminal investigation, Tyler Ashworth looked at me across that courtroom and said, in front of Sergeant Reyes, in front of Walter Kowalski, in front of Mrs. Patricia Monroe, and every other person in those seats, he said, "Your Honor, with all due respect, men like you have been doing this a long time. You should understand how the world actually works." He said, "Men like you." Like I was a relic. Like the bench I sat behind was a prop in someone else's story. Like 40 years of justice was just furniture. Men like you. I did not raise my voice. I never raised my voice. I said, "Mr. Ashworth, I have been on this bench longer than you have been alive. I have seen men far more powerful than your family stand exactly where you are standing. And I will tell you what I told every single one of them. The law does not care about your belt or your car or your father's title. In this room, everyone is equal." I paused. "Everyone, including you." And then the door in the back of my courtroom opened, and Senator Richard Ashworth III walked in. Now, if you're part of this community, if you've been here watching these stories because you believe that justice is real and it matters, then this next moment is for you. Like this video right now, not because the algorithm needs it, though it does, but because what Senator Ashworth did when he walked into that courtroom deserves to be witnessed by every single person who still believes in something greater than money and power. You are part of something real right now. Don't go anywhere. Senator Richard Ashworth III was a tall man, silver hair, a charcoal suit, the easy confidence of a man accustomed to rooms full of people who wanted something from him. He walked in ready to fix a problem. I could see it in his stride. He was going to write a check, make a call, and have his son home for dinner. That was the plan. I had seen that plan before. He walked to the front of the courtroom. He looked at his son. He looked at me. And then he stopped, because he saw the name on my clerk's docket sheet as she handed me the updated paperwork. He saw the name Walter Kowalski listed as the injured party and witness. And something happened to Senator Richard Ashworth III that I have never seen happen to a powerful man in my courtroom. His face broke, not crumpled, broke, like something structural gave way inside him. He said, and the courtroom heard it, he said, "Walter Kowalski from the 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines." Walter, still at the podium, turned. Slowly, he looked at the senator. There was a long silence. Walter said, "I was 2nd Battalion, yes." The senator walked forward 2 more steps. He said, "Your Honor, I need to tell this courtroom something, if you will allow me." I said, "Go ahead, Senator." And he said, "My father's name was Richard Ashworth, Jr. He died 8 years ago. But every year for the last 30 years on May 14th, my father would get very quiet. He would sit at the kitchen table and he would look out the window and he would not speak for most of the day. When I was 12 years old, I finally asked him why, and he told me that on May 14th, 1968, his helicopter went down over a rice paddy in Quang Tri Province and it caught fire. And a man in his unit, a young man from Providence, Rhode Island, a kid who was 19 years old and had no reason to go back into that fire, went back anyway, twice. He pulled my father out of that helicopter. He burned his hands doing it, and my father never saw him again. My father said that man's name every single May 14th until the day he died. He said, "Walter Kowalski saved my life," and I never got to thank him. There was no sound in that courtroom, none. I looked at Walter Kowalski's hands, and I saw for the first time, because I had not been close enough before, or I had not been looking, I saw the old scarring along the backs of both hands, pale and smooth, the way burn scars heal over decades. 47 years of carrying a secret. 47 years of pulling a man from a fire and never asking for a single thing in return. Not a word, not a thank you, not even the acknowledgement that it happened. And every Tuesday, he walked 6 blocks in the cold to buy the generic blood pressure pills because he could not afford the bus. Tyler Ashworth was looking at Walter Kowalski. The Instagram caption was still trending on someone's phone somewhere in Providence, and Tyler Ashworth was crying, not politely, crying the way young men cry when the architecture of their whole sense of themselves collapses at once. His father put a hand on his shoulder and did not say anything. I took a breath. I took a very long breath, and then I delivered my sentence. I fined Tyler Ashworth the maximum allowable amount under every applicable statute, $4,400 in total fines. His license was suspended for 18 months. His Lamborghini was impounded pending the federal investigation. He was ordered to complete 400 hours of community service. Not general community service, but specifically with the Rhode Island Veterans Home on Metacom Avenue, where he would assist staff in daily care for elderly veterans every Saturday and Sunday for the next 2 years. I ordered him to personally appear at a meeting of the Phantom Circuit federal investigation and provide full cooperation to Agent Greer's team in exchange for the state's willingness to advocate for reduced federal exposure, contingent on complete disclosure. And I ordered him to write a letter, a real letter, handwritten minimum 2 pages, to Delia Webb and her son Marcus, who had spent 4 days in a children's hospital and never got an explanation. And then I did something I have never done in 38 years on the bench. I stepped down from behind my desk. I walked to the podium where Walter Kowalski was still standing. I extended my hand. He looked at it, then he shook it, and I said, loud enough for everyone in that room to hear, Mr. Kowalski, on behalf of this court, on behalf of this city, and on behalf of every person in this room who is lucky enough to live in a country that men like you protected, thank you for your service, and thank you for coming today. He looked at me with those steady blue eyes, and he said, Your Honor, I was just crossing the street. That was it. I was just crossing the street. I had to clear my throat twice before I could speak again. The senator approached Walter after I stepped back. He didn't say much. He just took Walter's scarred hands in his and held them, and Tyler Ashworth stood 3 feet away and watched his grandfather's debt being paid in a courthouse hallway by a man who had never asked for anything. I want to tell you what I took home with me that evening. I want to tell you what 40 years on this bench has taught me that no law school classroom ever could. Justice is not just about punishment. It is not just about fines and sentences and gavels and courtroom procedures. Justice is about recognition. It is about saying in front of witnesses that a person's life has value, that what they gave, whether it was 2 tours in a war zone or 19-year-old hands pushed into the fire of a burning helicopter, that those things matter, that they are seen. We live in a world that is very loud about certain kinds of achievement. It applauds the car and the followers and the belt and the table at the restaurant that you have to know someone to get. It puts those things on a screen for 341,000 people to see. But it is very quiet about the Walter Kowalskis, the people who walk 6 blocks in the cold and never complain, the people who went back into the fire and never told a soul. We don't build monuments to them. We don't notice them in crosswalks. And sometimes we drive past them at 67 miles per hour without stopping. I am 72 years old. I have sat in this chair for a long time, and if there is one thing I know with certainty, it is this. The universe keeps its ledger perfectly. Every debt is recorded. Every act of courage is noted. Every person you ignore on a crosswalk, every time you treat another human being as an inconvenience instead of a life, that goes in the book. And sometimes the universe settles those accounts in a courthouse in Providence on a gray October morning in front of every witness that needs to be there to see it. Walter Kowalski went home that afternoon on the bus. His daughter Carol called me the next morning. She had somehow gotten my clerk's number, and she was crying and laughing at the same time, and she said, He never told me any of that. He never said a word. He went to bed last night and said it was a fine day. A fine day. After 47 years of silence and 6 blocks in the cold and a white car that did not stop, a fine day. If this story moved you, If something in your chest responded to Walter Kowalski the way mine did, then you are exactly who I made this for. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. You didn't have to do that, but you did, and that tells me something about you. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave a comment and tell me the name of a veteran in your life who never gets enough credit. And if you want to see the case that came the very next week, a 19-year-old girl, a stolen identity, and a judge who knew her grandfather, then stay right here because that story will change the way you see forgiveness forever. I'll see you there.